Alright, how's it going, folks? I'm back again for another video here in the series, Realistic Data Gathering and Targeting, if you want to call it that. I'm on the surface here during the day, and I wanted to rejoin here I've been playing with some different plotting techniques, and I know in my previous day video, I covered plotting using length and angle on bow because mast height is not always readily visible, and that's great, and that's true. You can certainly see the length of the ship in general, the bow and the stern, where the bow starts and where the stern ends, pretty readily. However, that requires a lookup in the recognition manual, and I thought to myself, and I've been making my way back through Das Boot, and the Buchheim describes an engagement there on the surface where, and this is consistent with what I'd read from Hitman, if you're familiar with Hitman's work for Silent Hunter 3, etc., where the skippers would use the position of the masts over the horizon, or I should say the amount of mast that was sticking out over the horizon, so basically gauging how far hull down the ship was, and then basically making a guesstimate as to how tall the masts are of the ship, very rough estimate obviously, and based on how much mast is showing over the horizon, he could have sort of a set, I don't know if you want to call it sort of a catalog of ranges in his head based on how much mast is showing. And Buchheim actually describes the skipper in Das Boot as doing that very thing, just simply looking through his binoculars and saying, I think they're about medium-sized freighters. It's about 14 nautical miles away, and then it describes how the navigator starts to plot based on that. And so I thought to myself, what's a good point of reference, I guess, on a ship with a general average height, and that is actually the funnel itself. And so I've been playing around with this plotting method using the funnel only, and I've arrived at a procedure that I want to demonstrate now that I think is actually, if you make some allowances, it actually can be pretty accurate combined with the other methods I describe in my other videos. And so I am going to, one thing I did do, is I did make an overlay of the centiradian scale from the periscopes that I use actually on the surface with the Uzo. Now there's a lot of pitching going on with both the Uzo and the binoculars and making range finding difficult, but so what I actually do, and I won't do it in this recording, I'll use the attack periscope just so that it's more stabilized and I don't have to alt tab out of the game. But the purpose for I'll take a screenshot of it once I've got that bearing in the Uzo on target. I'll take a screenshot and then copy paste it into Word, literally a Word document, and then measure that height utilizing, and the reason for doing so is to be able to utilize that additional magnification factor. The Uzo is 7 magnification versus 6 of the periscope. It makes somewhat of a large difference in getting a more accurate range. Now, before you stop me and say, or want to stop me and say, well, wait a minute, you're not essentially pausing the game by doing that? Yes and no. The justification for doing that, for essentially taking a screenshot, going out of the game, and measuring based on a still image, is that you have to consider what I just said. Is, when you're an individual, a person standing on the bridge of a U-boat that's pitching up and down, and you've got binoculars in your hands. Now, understanding that the binoculars the skippers used were also 7 magnification, they were essentially the same make and model as that which fit on top of the Uzo mount. The skipper had more powerful binoculars like that. He would be able to hold those binoculars steady and see the mast tips in relation to the horizon, and also gauge whether those mast tips over the course of whatever interval you're using to plot, 5 minutes let's say, whether those mast tips are growing or shrinking over the horizon, and knowing you know, this sort of catalog of ranges in his head, off the top of his head. He could say, so and so much is of mast is showing, let's say it's this many kilometers away or whatever, and then in the next when it's time to take the next bearing, he knows that the masts have gotten a little larger. Now you can start to understand how a skipper could, or whoever could get a feel for ranges. And so I don't feel bad about going out of game and using that kind of method, because you'd be sitting there sort of equalizing the movements of the boat in your knees, so to speak, and holding that holding your binoculars relatively steady enough to be able to actually just see how much mast is poking over the horizon. We don't have hull down ships in this game. This is really a workaround, and I think really, I don't know, call it, for all you realism nutcases like myself, it's a legal, I would say a legal way of getting a good range on the surface by doing that. So using the funnel height. So I've arrived at just a general average funnel height of 23 meters to use. 23 meters. Now, funnels, just from what I haven't gone through an extensive analysis of all of the ships as far as all their funnel heights in the game, but it seems to me that a reasonable range is 20 to 24 meters. I've arrived at 23 meters, and understanding that you are going to get range differences, obviously, using that, but there's a little workaround that you'll see in the plotting exercise that where you basically just you plot an approximation, and then over time you should be, once you get a more refined angle on bow, you can also refine you'll refine that course. So anyway, enough blabbering on here. Let's demonstrate how this would work in game here. So as you can see, I've got a convoy here. I am on easy mode again for instructional purposes. I am going to, like I said, I'm going to do this through the attack periscope, just because you can see me using the center radian scale without me going and using my method of alt-tabbing out and into Word and measuring on my screen, essentially. So I will essentially start the overhaul maneuver now, and I will start plotting now. But one thing I will do also, since we are what it appears to be anyway, aft of the target's beam, meaning that their angle on bow is such that they're heading away from us. I'm going to take advantage of that, and I am going to, as we approach a 90-degree angle on bow, I'm going to actually use the constant bearing, actually some modicum of the constant bearing method that I demonstrated in my night video. Essentially slow down once I'm nearing a 90-degree angle on bow, and then and then turn roughly to their course and just get a gauge on what the speed is based on our own speed. That's the so-called Ausdampfen that's mentioned in the both the U-boat commander's handbook as well as other sources. It's an inexact Ausdampfen method, but you know, you're basically seeing an approximation of their speed, which actually enables you to further refine your plot. And so that's the advantage of starting either directly abeam or slightly aft of a beam of the target, so that you can actually get to the point where you arrive at a 90-degree angle on bow. Now, I could be wrong about that. They may be coming toward us. I actually don't know at this point whether they're pointing toward us or away from us. So if they're pointing toward us, well, then it was a great in theory, but we're not going to see that. But if they are pointing, if they are indeed pointing away from us, then we'll be able to see that. But this will become clear hopefully during the plot. So anyway, I'm going to go down and start demonstrating this method. I'm not going to speed up any faster than ahead slow, just so that you can see kind of how this is going to work. So I'm going to use a mast height of 23. I've got that plugged into my file here. 23 meters, 6 magnification. I did add 7 here for those folks who do want to start using range finding by way of the of going in Word, and I can actually demonstrate how what the settings you'll need to do. You might have to play around with it a little bit, but I'm using 6 because I'm using the attack scope. So all I'm going to do is get ready with my tools, and then there's 290. Okay, so So at any old time here, I'm going to, oh, first of all, let me just make a note of my own course here. Whoops. 110. Yeah, so 110. Let's get this plugged in here. Okay, and then we're going to go up and start plotting here. So I'm going to plot at 5-minute intervals. So it just gives you enough time to do your stuff. And so the first plot I'm going to make right now. I note the bearing, which is 293, and then I note the marks from the funnel. Funnel is relatively easy to see, so I note the marks from the funnel. So 293 at and try to get it somewhat exact here. 293 at what, about 1.1. 293 at 1.1. So I go in and I say 293. Okay, bearing is 43. 1.1. 8360. 8360. So true bearing is 43. Range is 8360. It's been since brought to my attention that you can use the keypad to do plotting, so I will do that. That makes things much easier. So just start a line and then type in on your keypad 8360 and then hit enter and then click 043. Hit enter again and you're plotted. No clicking and dragging required. So the next step in here, because we're using a mast height, or excuse me, a funnel height that's not exact, I recommend making a circle of essentially 2,000 meters in diameter. And you can also do the same thing here, 1000, enter. So I know that that target is somewhere. I should have extended this a little further out, but you can extend the bearing line all the way out here, I guess. That target is somewhere on this line here. We don't know exactly where. This circle accounts for the inaccuracy of our funnel. So you basically obviously created a range over which he could be. Now, the next step here is to estimate the angle on bow here, and so I'm still going to just operate under the assumption that he is in fact heading away from us. And so at that particular bearing there, bearing was 293. He's now moved to 291, so we'll take that into account. But I would say just eyeballing that anyway. Well, we could use this ship as well. They're all going on the same course, and he's about 293. So I will say that that's probably 90, 100, 110, maybe 115 right, maybe 120 right, 120 right. So 120 right. Two ways we could do this. We could either measure it with the protractor or we could use the attack disc. I'm going to use the attack disc. So 120 right at 293. 293 is a relative bearing. Own course is 110. 120 right. So his course is 103. So 120 right. So 120, 103. So I'm going to plot that. And that's my initial estimate. 103, I think I said. Now, as we go on here, so the next plot will be at a 119.04. So essentially, what we're saying here is, I've got his course estimate, or his angle on bow estimated, therefore his course estimated. I know he's somewhere along this line here. 2,000 meters generally accounts for, in a worst case scenario, your mast or your funnel height being off by 4 meters or so. Again, it's going to be a larger difference at larger ranges, because you're a little more prone to error at larger ranges. But 2,000 meters, I think, is a good approximation of your margin of error. So as you can see, it sort of stands to reason here, as you continue to make this plot, and as you keep plotting ranges and bearings down the road, you've got bearing lines, which are obviously much more exact than your ranges are, more based in reality than your ranges are, I should say. You're able to establish a range of speeds, knowing at all times that his bearings are, or excuse me, his plot points are always within this 2,000 meter margin of error. You're able, and getting a better refined angle on bow, you're able to sort of run some different scenarios based on oh, 1904. Sorry, I blew by the. Hold on one second here. Let's get another range here. So, bearing is now 289, and the range is probably about closer to 1. 289 and 1. 289 and 1. So now we're at 39 and 9200. So 9200 039. So you can see this inaccuracy is already starting to creep in here. So our mark is here. We draw our circle from here. 1 0 0 0. So he's actually probably likely right about here. But we don't know that yet. So we're just speculating at this point. But as we further refine this plot, we'll further refine that. So that's bearing line number 2. So we'll keep on keeping on here, and we could even estimate the angle on bow again there, and we could say, yeah, that's probably, I don't know, 100, 110 or so. 110. Or we could simply just compare it with what the tack disc is generating. 116 right. 116 right. Yeah, maybe 110 right is more accurate. So 109. And this way you just sort of further refine. 109. Yeah, which would still be technically valid, but we'll leave it as is for now. We'll further get some. The angle on bow is relatively consistent here. So I think we are correct in saying that they are going away from us. And we could even match. So our next plot is at 11:24:17. We could even take the time to come to course 103 now, so that we're on a parallel course with them. We're almost there already. 103, about there. Come back up now, and remember too that if you use my method of using the UZO with some sort of overlay, it does make your life a little easier in terms of being able to see the target more clearly, because you've got a larger magnification, so therefore you've got a larger area to measure. So hopefully he doesn't get washed out by this other ship here. I did choose to plot the far target. Obviously it doesn't make a difference, but hopefully we don't lose sight of him here. So at 24:17, we got about another minute left here. Just so I don't completely lose sight of him, I'm actually going to go in just a little bit, turn toward just a little bit here, so that we don't lose complete sight of him. So 3:35. So very quickly, I'm going to jump down and get our new course, which is 94. And then make sure we get up in time to take the next bearing and range. So 24:17, almost there. And we're it's getting slightly obscured, but we should still be able to measure him okay there. Okay, we'll mark our next mark here, and we'll say the bearing is 301, and the range using the funnel height, which is about, yeah, okay, so we're about 1.1 again there. 301 at 1.1. 1.1. 8360 again. 35 at 8360. So 35. So 8360. 035. Okay, yeah. So this one was I think we were a little off on that one there. But then we've got mark there, and then we'll do our 1,000-meter circle. So in this way, we're trying to narrow it down here. Always trying to narrow this down. And as we get a more an angle on bow that's closer to 90, and I'm actually going to speed up now a little bit because we can speed up here and try to somewhat approach this 90-degree angle on bow here a little quicker. Maybe not that much, but we'll speed up maybe to half speed because we're going to be slowing down once we get to 90 again. Now we're going to turn to match their course. So 29 and a quarter. We'll start her up again. A random little. So as you can see already, if these ranges are indeed correct, and his course is in general correct here, what we can already start getting is an idea of his speed. And so if I just I'll use this for example here, 10 minutes. Whoops. Let's just say 7 or 8. Start with 7 minutes. 5 knots, maybe 12 minutes. 6 knots is 10 minutes. Okay, so maybe about 6 knots as for right now. Yeah, so now we're getting a little clearer view here of these guys. And approaching. And we'll look at this individual here, because this guy here is going to hit his 90-degree angle on bow before anybody else will. So we'll look at him. We'll look at him first to try to gauge our speed against him. Getting to be about, I would say, probably in the ballpark of about 105, maybe right angle on bow at this point. Yeah, you definitely have to be Johnny on the spot with that timestamp. As soon as you plot that, as soon as your time is up, you get that bearing figured out, and then go right here and plot it right away. The same is true if you're using my zero angle on bow method. If you run around the target, you got to get that. You got to be quick with getting that timestamp down there, so you have an accurate spot to measure from. All right, so we've got 24, 21, 29, 21. We're getting close here. And really, I mean, once we hit 90 degree angle on bow and we match and we get a good idea of their speed, you know, we can pretty much, and obviously having a 90 degree angle on bow will help us in further refining their course. So we true this course line up here and get it to where we're at a point where his speed is matching. We can really stop plotting if we really want to. We already have enough information at that point that we need. So all right, there we go. We're at 297, and the range is it's just still the same. It's about 1.1 or so. So 297 at 1.1. 297. Let me just make sure our course is the same. I don't think we've changed course at all, but let me double check here. 297, so 95. Oops. 32 at 8360. What did I say it was? 32. Whoops, okay. 83.032. Okay. Yeah, so okay, so you can see now we get another one there. Do our 1,000. Yep, so you can see if we wanted to really fare these course lines, you know, you could say, yeah, maybe right here or so. So that might be his course. Just time will tell here as we get it further refined. Extend these bearing lines so that they cover the entire circle, so that we can get the full range of possibilities here. I used to use this method in Silent Hunter 3 with Stiebler's patches. Those introduced a certain measure of inaccuracy in the watch officer's range estimates, and so it was always helpful to kind of plot and say, okay, at so and so many meters there was a 2,000 meter, I think it was 2,000 at long range, 2,000 meter inaccuracy. So you'd plot these circles, and then you'd kind of refine as you got angle on bow nailed down and maybe matched his speed, his course and speed. You would have you'd have a pretty good idea of his speed, and you can adjust. It's actually similar to TMA. Now I hate using the analogy of TMA with a U-boat, but really that's essentially what you're doing here. Is you're finding a good, you know, his course that is fitting his speed that you've matched. So I'm going to actually just turn to what seems to me to be about a parallel course here as we get ready to prepare for a 90-degree angle on bow. And I'm going to slow down a little bit more here as we get there. Okay, so then, as we're getting pretty close to 90 degree on this fella right here. So get down here, just update our course. 114. On course is 114. And we can make another quick estimate of the angle on bow as of right now. So that's probably right there. That's probably about 100 right, or maybe 95, maybe 95 right. So at 272, 26, or up here I should say, 272, 114, 95 right. So about 111. So 111 or so is what what his course is. So 111. So maybe actually closer to here, which would fit in all of those 1,000 rings. There, that's 111. but we'll get there. We'll get there soon here as we get to be a 90-degree angle on bow. Once we hit 90, and since we've got a number of plot points here already, once we hit 90 and we know pretty much his course, and we've slowed down enough to where his bearing just barely changes, there's really no reason why we need to do any further plotting. We keep an eye on his. If anything, what you can do is turn to be about a parallel course here. If anything, what you can do is just frequently, every so often, just take a bearing at range and check it with his track and where you think he'd be along that track, as a just as a check while you're overhauling at top speed. There's really no reason to do the 5-minute intervals any longer after we've matched his 90-degree angle on, or matched his course and speed, and then adjusted our course line here to be where we think he is. So we'll see that here in a little bit. I'm getting a little impatient here, so I'm going to increase to half speed. Let's true up my course here for the plot, or for the map, I should say. 109. Okay, I'm going to get this up here because I'm going to set this already to 90 so that I can get his course as soon as we hit a 90-degree angle on bow. Getting closer here, getting closer here. I don't think I'm gonna, for this particular video, I'm not gonna keep you with me for the duration of the overhaul maneuver. This is purely just to demonstrate this method of plotting, which is really nothing new. It's basically just a function of or I should say a method that I've used before in other videos, or excuse me, in Silent Hunter 3, but using that mast height, or that funnel height I should say, of 23 meters, and then allowing for a margin of error, should be able to get it pretty exact. Alright, so we're getting somewhat close. By the time we hit 270 or so, he's probably about, maybe now he's about 95, so just come left a little bit more. Try to refine that. And we'll go ahead and go slow ahead now. Try to get, we're on his 90-degree. And then, you know, we're just going to watch that bearing change here very slowly. Hopefully it's very slow, and then adjust our speed so that we've roughly matched. And based on the plot so far, understanding that he could be anywhere in these ranges here, but you know, we can run a couple different scenarios here. So for example, I mean, you're going to say, okay, that's 17 minutes there. This is a 15-minute time period here, 5, 10, 15. So, you know, he could be anywhere from you know, going this way to you know, to down here. So he's any of those is a possibility. So if you wanted to look at it this way, you could say, okay, he's 15, 13 here. He's anywhere from 6 knots here to other case scenario is, you know, there's 25. So whatever speed that equates with, that's one way you could think about this. You can certainly get a range of speeds that he could possibly be at either extreme. So this is inside this one here, now that's inside that one. This is still inside the third circle, and this is inside the fourth circle. So he could be going this way as well. Now we know he's not, but that 25, you know, he'd have to be going. So you can obviously rule some of these out right off the bat. But you know, that right there, okay, so about 11 knots or so. So anywhere from 6 to 11 knots. Now that's a huge margin, of course, but you know, you can see his angle on bow. You can relatively accurately gauge what his course line is, and so therefore you can narrow down the possibilities tremendously here. And because as you see, I mean, we've the bearing change wasn't that drastic, and so so you could see that that we were going, you know, not wildly off from his speed at that point. So yeah, so now 270, just a little bit here, getting pretty close. This course is really looking. We're pretty darn close at this point to have matched this course. So 106, which I think is relatively close to the original estimate we had. I think we originally estimated 103 as their course. So 106, which we can call that probably pretty good in terms of his course. So if we want to just take another quick look here, yeah, maybe a couple more degrees to the left. That's probably about right there. That's probably, whoops, that's probably roughly his course right there. 103, which I think that's originally what we estimated, but we kind of came full circle on that one. 103. 103. So at this point, what we can do is start adjusting our speed to see if we can try to match him. So we know that the bearing is moving aft right now, so we're going to drop down to dead slow, and we're going to watch what that does here. So dead slow is going to give me about 7.1 knots. So understanding that I think I'm on a, well, first of all, I need to get on that course at 103. Which I practically am already. Yeah, okay, so, and then, now that we're at 7 knots, I watch that bearing change like a hawk. And that's gonna narrow down my possibilities, greatly with, as far as what his speed is. So he's slowly inching backwards. Let's just make sure we've stabilized at 7 knots. Yep, 7.1 knots. That's what we want. So we're gonna keep watching, and we know that he's dropping back a little bit there. So we have one other option here, one more option, 10 slower. It's gonna give us about 6.5 knots. So we'll keep that going, and this is actually gonna jibe more or less with what the 6 knots that we plotted already. So our ranges were actually, or our original course line and ranges were pretty good. Okay, so 6.5. Now this, of course, you know, I get it that this gives you a pretty exact speed, a workable speed, but you only have this luxury really if you're already relatively at 90-degree angle on bow. If you want to just do this sort of eyeball method, you can use the constant bearing method that I used in my night video. As well at any angle on the bow, but you have to just understand that the further away you get from a 90-degree angle on the bow, because of the law of sines, the sine of 90 is 1. So it stands to reason that the further away you get from 90, that the more you're dividing by a decimal that's lower, much lower than 1. Okay, so he's even still going. We're even still gaining on him at 6 point whatever knots, so I'm going to call him about 6 knots. We're at 6.3. We're just inching ahead of him, so he is about 6 knots. I think his course is about 103. So if I can find a course line on here that's if I keep my time measure up here, and I find a course line that's 103, that's going to give me and I set 6 knots. Okay, and I find a course line that's going to give me 15 minutes on the dot. Then I think that's going to give me his. So it took him 16 minutes to get here. So he's probably further away. He's probably up here. 103. Oops. Let me scroll in because I got the snaps to these here. 103, 16. Probably further up this way. Probably maybe right here. 1552 at 103. Yeah, so that's gonna be, yeah, maybe it even falls outside of this range ring just a slight bit. 16, 103. Yeah. 03, 16. Yeah, it's gonna be up here someplace here. 03. Yeah, so probably maybe right about here. It was a little longer than 15 minutes because I was asleep at the switch a couple times here, so probably about here. So you could see my first range estimate wasn't entirely accurate, but that fell outside of that a little bit. But the rest of these here, you can see I had underestimated. In general, I think that 23 meters was probably too short. His mast height, his funnel height was probably taller than that, hence his longer ranges. And so at that, so that's what I'm thinking his course line probably is there. Yeah. So that initial range was more in the ballpark of basically the limit of visibility in this game when we first spotted him. Yeah. So it's not deadly accurate, of course, but you know it's somewhat simulating the inaccuracies that are inherent in estimating range by eyeball. But as you get to a 90-degree angle on bow, you're able to actually refine that that speed estimate a little more, and thereby getting your plot a little more accurate. Now, what do you do in the case where what do you do in the case where you're already ahead of his beam and you're not at a 90-degree angle on bow, so therefore you can't estimate his course accurately? Well, I would say in that case, simply just estimate the angle on bow to the best of your ability. You can still use the constant bearing method to do it, and I would recommend that you do so. You know, and if you're so far ahead that maybe making a plot doesn't make sense, well, there are plenty of other methods that you can use that I've outlined already. Basically, achieve a constant bearing and get a speed based on angle on bow only, own speed and angle on bow only, or you could do the bearing change method, Auswanderungsverfahren, where you estimate an initial range and then look at his bearing change over a minute, and using own speed and angle on bow on that initial range, get speed that way. There's other ways you can do it, but if you're blessed with the opportunity to be able to do a full plotting maneuver like this, well then you could do a couple of checks here and get a rough plot based on rough ranges using the funnel height, and then somewhat narrow down where you think he is based on somewhat matching his speed, which has plenty of references in historical books. That's known as, if you ever see in any old KTBs, so Kriegstagebücher, which is what the skippers the log books they kept, you'll see mention made to Ausdampfen, so Kurs und Fahrt ausgedampft, or Ausdampfen von Kurs und Fahrt, basically matching of course and speed, or course and speed were matched, the bearing change was suppressed. This is what they're talking about, at least to my knowledge, is matching course and speed to get that. And then in some cases you'll even see dual mention made of both. So they'll say, okay, we we matched speed, or matched speed. So you'd say ausgedampfte Fahrt. Matched speed was x, and speed based on plotting, so it's in German is erkoppelte Fahrt, is y. So which basically indicates they've used two different methods to get that at range while they were overtaking the target. So at any rate, that's the method. Pay no attention to this guy here. I must have been a little off on that one, but as you can see, the other ones reasonably fell into in a decent pattern here. So really, it was about 15 and 15:18 was the true time, and so 15:18 is somewhere up in here. 15:30, 15. So that's pretty close there, I think. But so at any rate, that's the method of plotting that I've sort of arrived at now, and I think it's pretty close. The advantage of it is, primary advantage of it is that you get you don't have to look in the recognition manual. You simply just use 23 meters and use a diameter of 2,000 meters to plot based on each point, and then and then you're just basically narrowing down when you further get a better course estimate and a speed estimate if you want to match his speed. Then you can basically narrow that down pretty closely here. Now that bearing actually has not changed very much, and we're going 6.3, so he's probably even going a tidge over 6 knots, and so it'd be great to get this in decimal increments, but basically 6 knots is close enough. So this course line here is probably pretty close. So what I may do is I'll stop the video now, and I will overhaul this target, not change anything, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this is somewhat of an accurate course line here. I'll do the 0-degree angle on bow method, but we will reconvene here in a bit.